Maxim Steele had been working as the Calith sisters' bodyguard for several weeks now, and with each passing day, the lines between duty and something more personal began to blur. It wasn't that he hadn't been accustomed to close protection before. He had guarded politicians, businessmen, and celebrities, but none of them had quite the presence that Lyra and Serena Calith did. They weren't just clients. They were powerful, influential figures in the galaxy, heirs to a vast empire. And they were making it clear that they didn't need him around simply for protection. They needed him to become part of their world. At first, Max kept his distance, focusing strictly on his job. His role was clear: keep the sisters safe, protect them from the ever-growing threats that loomed over them, and remain unnoticed in their world of intrigue. But as days turned into weeks, he found it harder to maintain that professional barrier. The twins were unlike anyone he had ever met. Lyra, always calm and composed, never made any demands on him. Instead, she'd often share quiet, insightful conversations about her empire, the complexities of ruling, and the sacrifices that came with power. He'd never seen someone with such a sharp mind, her words often leaving him deep in thought long after they were spoken. Max was learning to understand her in ways that surprised even him. Her cold, calculating exterior seemed to hide a mind that was always 2 steps ahead of everyone around her. But she was more than just a ruler. She was a woman burdened by the weight of her family's expectations. Then there was Serena. Fiery, impulsive, and full of energy, Serena had an unpredictable nature that made her both captivating and dangerous. Her charm could light up a room, but Max quickly realized that underneath the warmth was a fierce determination to protect her sister at any cost. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind, and that made her an interesting challenge. Despite her outgoing personality, Max saw the subtle moments when she'd let her guard down, revealing a vulnerability that made her even more intriguing. One evening, after a particularly tense meeting with a group of political figures, the sisters invited Max to join them for a quiet dinner. They'd never asked him to join them before, always keeping him at arm's length, but tonight felt different. Serena's laugh echoed through the dining room, and for the first time, Max felt like he was truly included in their world, not just as a bodyguard, but as someone they trusted. "Max," Serena said, her eyes sparkling with mischief, "you've been with us long enough now. It's time you join the fun. We need someone who can actually handle a conversation without getting all stiff and formal." Max chuckled, feeling the weight of his usual role slip away for a moment. "I'm more comfortable with action than words, but I'm willing to try." The evening continued with lively conversation, and even Lyra began to open up, sharing some of her deeper thoughts on the future of the Empire. Max could sense the bond between the sisters, an unbreakable connection that went beyond blood. They were not only allies but also each other's anchors in a world full of enemies. And for the first time, Max realized just how important his role was becoming, not just as their protector, but as someone who was slowly becoming a part of their inner circle. Max knew that this wasn't just an assignment anymore. He was drawn into a world of politics, power, and personal connections that he hadn't expected. And as much as he tried to keep a professional distance, he knew that with every day that passed, he was becoming more involved, more important in the lives of Lyra and Serena Calith, and that realization made him both excited and terrified for what lay ahead. Maxim Steele had always been a man who preferred the quiet, steady pace of his life. A skilled bodyguard with a reputation for discretion and efficiency, he had spent years protecting high-profile individuals in various parts of the galaxy. But nothing could have prepared him for the assignment that landed on his lap one ordinary Tuesday morning. He was summoned to the office of Admiral Drake, a well-known figure in the galaxy's military circles. As Max entered the room, the Admiral's stern face was already waiting for him. "Maxim," the Admiral began, his voice rough, yet commanding. "I've got a job for you. High profile. Very sensitive. The Calith sisters are in danger, and I need you to protect them." Max raised an eyebrow, surprised. The Calith sisters, Lyra and Serena, were not just wealthy socialites. They were heirs to one of the most powerful intergalactic empires in existence. If anyone needed protection, it was certainly them. But why him? He wasn't the first choice for such a prestigious assignment. As the Admiral explained, Max's reputation for keeping a low profile and his calm under pressure made him the ideal candidate. It wasn't just about guarding the sisters from assassination attempts or kidnappers. It was about blending in, gaining their trust, and becoming part of their inner circle without drawing too much attention. Max listened carefully as Admiral Drake detailed the mission. He would be stationed with the Caliph sisters, acting as their personal bodyguard, and ensure their safety amidst the growing threats against them. But Max wasn't prepared for what came next. The twins are complicated, the Admiral said. They have many enemies, even within their own family. And their bond, well, it's more than just familial. There's a delicate balance at play here. You'll need to be more than just their protector. You'll need to gain their trust, blend into their world, and understand their inner workings. Do not fail them. If you do, the Empire will be in chaos, and so will your life. The weight of the mission sank in. Max wasn't just protecting people. He was about to step into a world filled with political intrigue, betrayal, and a level of power he had never experienced. The sisters were more than just dignitaries. They were brilliant, calculating, and dangerous in their own ways. Max was given a few details about their personalities. Lyra, the older twin, was a calm and calculating leader, known for her grace and intelligence. Serena, on the other hand, was more impulsive and fiery, with a sharp wit and a fiercely protective nature toward her sister. He would have to deal with both of them carefully, never letting them see how out of his depth he felt. Max left the Admiral's office with a sense of anticipation. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for, the chance to prove himself on a scale he had never imagined. But as he prepared for his next move, he couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was about to change his life in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. Maxim Steele arrived at the Caliph sisters' estate just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the sprawling compound. The mansion stood tall and imposing, nestled among towering trees, its sleek design blending modern architecture with ancient alien influences. It was more than just a home. It was a symbol of the power the sisters held, a power that Max was now sworn to protect. As he stepped out of the transport, he was met by Ira, one of the sisters' most trusted advisors, who led him through the high-security gates and into the mansion's grand entrance. The moment Max entered, he was struck by the contrast between the cold, efficient security systems and the warmth of the luxurious interior. The grand foyer was adorned with priceless artifacts, holographic displays, and soft lighting that created a sense of comfort despite the overwhelming wealth around him. "Ira," Max said, his voice steady, "I'm here to protect them. Just tell me what I need to know." Ira nodded, her expression unreadable. "Of course. The twins are unique. Their bond is unlike anything you've probably ever encountered. While they're not exactly the most vulnerable individuals, their status and power make them prime targets. But their strength lies in their connection with each other. Understand that, and you'll understand them." Max was guided through the corridors of the mansion, eventually reaching a large, opulent living room. There, sitting on a plush sofa, were Lyra and Serena Caliph, the two women he was assigned to protect. At first glance, they couldn't have appeared more different. Lyra, the older twin, exuded a calm, composed elegance. Her long, dark hair framed her face perfectly, and her deep, calculating eyes seemed to see straight through him. Serena, in contrast, had an energy about her that was impossible to ignore. Her fiery red hair and intense gaze made her look like someone who was always ready for a challenge. She was the more outspoken of the two, her body language more relaxed, but there was no mistaking the sharpness in her eyes. Max gave them both a polite nod, feeling suddenly out of place in such luxurious surroundings. He was a bodyguard, a man of action, not someone accustomed to the political world these women ruled. "You must be Maxim Steele," Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. "We've heard much about you. I trust you're up for the task." Max straightened, making sure his voice was steady. "I'm here to do my job. Your safety is my priority." Serena, who had been leaning against a nearby table, smiled slightly. "I'm sure you'll do fine. But don't expect us to be the easy clients you've had before. We won't be sitting ducks, if that's what you're thinking." Max gave a brief nod, understanding the challenge they presented. These weren't the typical people he had protected before. The Caliph sisters weren't just royalty. They were powerful, independent, and most importantly, they didn't rely on others to keep them safe. But Max wasn't daunted. He was here to protect them, yes, but he also needed to understand them, to earn their trust. And that, he knew, would be no easy feat. The twins' bond was palpable, something he could feel in the air between them. They didn't speak often, but there was an unspoken understanding that Max could sense. They were more than sisters. They were a united force, and now Max was standing at the crossroads of their world, uncertain of where his place would be in the complex dynamic of their lives. He wasn't just their bodyguard. He was becoming part of their world. Max took a deep breath, preparing himself for the journey ahead. What had started as a simple assignment was already becoming much more than he'd anticipated. Maxim Steele found himself caught in a web of intrigue that he hadn't fully anticipated. When he was first assigned to protect Lyra and Serena Caliph, he thought his job would be straightforward: maintain security, avoid any threats, and keep a low profile. But as the days passed, he realized how much deeper the situation ran. The Caliph sisters were more than just powerful heirs to an empire. They were embroiled in a dangerous political game, one that had layers of betrayal, alliances, and hidden motives. And now Max was caught right in the middle of it. One afternoon, Lyra summoned Max to a private meeting in her office. The walls of the room were lined with holographic screens displaying live feeds of political events from across the galaxy. It was a far cry from the casual meetings he had grown used to, but it was a reflection of just how high the stakes were. Lyra stood by the window, looking out over the city below, her hands clasped behind her back. "Max," she said, her voice steady and calm, "you've been with us long enough now. I need to know where your loyalties lie." Max stiffened slightly at her words. He had always kept his distance, focusing on his role as a protector. But Lyra's question caught him off guard. He didn't expect to be drawn into the political side of things so directly. "My loyalties are with you," Max said, meeting her gaze. "My job is to keep you both safe. That's all I care about." Lyra turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "That's what I thought. But you must understand, Max, that there are more forces at play here than you realize. The enemies we face aren't just external. There are people close to us, people we trust, who are working against us." Max's mind raced. He had suspected that there were enemies within their inner circle, but hearing it confirmed was something else entirely. He had known that their empire was filled with political rivals, but the idea that someone close to them might be plotting against them was a different kind of threat. "Who?" Max asked, his voice low. "Who is working against you?" Lyra didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I need you to keep your eyes open. Pay attention to everything, Max. You're not just here to guard us anymore. I need you to help uncover who is trying to sabotage our family." Max nodded, his mind already running through the possibilities. He had always considered himself an excellent judge of character, but he was now tasked with something far more complicated. He wasn't just dealing with assassins or external threats. He was about to dive into the treacherous world of politics, where everyone had an agenda, and trust was a rare commodity. As Max left Lyra's office, his mind was spinning. He had always been focused on protecting the Caliph sisters, but now that task had expanded. He needed to uncover the traitors within their ranks and make sure the empire stayed intact. And somewhere along the way, He had to figure out where he fit in this world of power, betrayal, and danger. Max had never imagined that this assignment, which had started as a simple bodyguard job, would become so much more. But as he walked down the halls of the mansion, he realized that everything had changed. The stakes had never been higher, and now he was a part of the Caliph sisters' struggle for power. What started as a mission to protect had evolved into something far more dangerous, and he suspected, far more personal. The next few days were a whirlwind for Maxim Steele. What had started as a simple bodyguard assignment had now evolved into a mission that blurred the lines between duty and personal involvement. Lyra and Serena Caliph had entrusted him with more than just their protection. They had asked him to uncover the truth about the threats they faced, and Max couldn't shake the feeling that he was now entangled in something far bigger than he had ever imagined. As part of his new role, Max was tasked with investigating the people closest to the sisters. Lyra had warned him about the internal enemies, but figuring out who they were was no easy task. The Caliph Empire was a web of complex relationships, where loyalty and deception often went hand in hand. Max had spent hours poring over confidential documents, analyzing security footage, and listening to hushed conversations between the sisters' advisors. It wasn't long before he started to uncover signs of a growing conspiracy within their own ranks. One evening, while Max was reviewing security footage in his temporary office, Serena walked in. Unlike her usual confident demeanor, she seemed tense, her eyes scanning the room as if searching for something she couldn't quite grasp. Max immediately stood up, sensing her discomfort. "Serena?" Max asked, his voice soft but firm. "What's going on?" She hesitated, as if debating whether to speak. Finally, she let out a long breath and crossed the room to sit across from him. "I'm starting to feel like we're being watched," she said quietly. "I don't know who to trust anymore, Max. There are people within our circle, people I thought we could rely on, who are behaving strangely. I don't know who's behind it, but it feels like they're waiting for the right moment to strike." Max listened intently. He had sensed Serena's unease for a while now, but hearing it confirmed made him even more determined to find out who was betraying them. He leaned forward, speaking with a seriousness he hadn't shown before. "I've been looking into it. I've found some discrepancies in the reports. There are people close to you, your inner circle, who might be involved. But it's not enough to act on yet. We need more." Serena's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and fear. "I never thought this would happen, Max. Our family has always been united. But now, I don't know who's on our side, and who isn't." She paused for a moment before continuing, her voice trembling slightly. "And Lyra, she's been so focused on keeping the Empire stable that I think she's blind to the danger lurking in the shadows. I'm afraid we might be too late." Max reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. He knew that Serena's concern wasn't just about the Empire. It was about her sister, and the bond they shared. "We're not too late," he said, his voice steady. "I'm going to find out who's behind this. I'll protect both of you, I swear." Serena looked at him, her eyes softening slightly. "Thank you, Max. You don't know how much it means to me, how much it means to both of us." As she stood up and left the room, Max was left alone with his thoughts. The stakes had never been higher. What had started as a simple mission to protect two powerful women had now become a dangerous game of trust and deception. Max knew that uncovering the traitors within their inner circle wouldn't be easy, but he also knew he couldn't walk away. The Caliph sisters had become more than just his responsibility. They had become people he cared about deeply. And no matter what, he was going to find out who was betraying them and stop them, even if it meant risking everything. Maxim Steele had spent days trying to piece together the puzzle that had become the Caliph sisters' lives. Lyra and Serena Caliph were no longer just high-profile clients. They had become a part of his world in ways he hadn't expected. His role as their bodyguard had evolved into something far more complex. He was no longer just protecting them from external threats. Now he was part of their inner circle, diving headfirst into the web of political alliances, betrayals, and dangerous secrets that surrounded them. After his conversation with Serena, Max had intensified his investigation. The growing suspicion that there was someone within their circle working against them weighed heavily on his mind. He had always been a man of action, but now he was facing a different kind of challenge. This wasn't a fight he could win with physical strength alone. It was a battle of wits, and Max knew that he would have to be careful. The more he dug, the more complicated the situation became. The sisters' enemies weren't just external. They were far closer than he had ever imagined. One evening, while going over confidential documents in his quarters, Max received a message from Lyra. She wanted to meet him privately. It wasn't unusual for her to request these kinds of meetings, but this time, Max sensed urgency in her tone. He left his room and made his way to her private study, his thoughts racing. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew it would be important. As he entered the study, Lyra was standing by the window, gazing out at the sprawling city below. She turned as Max walked in, her expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of concern in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. "Max," she said quietly, "I need you to listen carefully." Max nodded, his attention fully on her. "I'm listening." "There are people I've trusted for years," Lyra continued, her voice steady, but laced with a hint of frustration. "People I thought had our best interests at heart. But something is off. There are too many inconsistencies, too many people who seem to know our every move. I've started to question everything and everyone." Max's mind raced. He had suspected for some time that there was betrayal within the ranks, but hearing it from Lyra made the situation all the more real. "Who are you talking about?" he asked, his voice low. "Who do you suspect?" Lyra walked closer to him, her steps deliberate. "I don't have all the answers yet, Max, but I suspect Varian, my personal advisor. He's been acting strange lately. He's always been reliable, but there's something different about him now. I've seen him speaking in private with people I don't recognize, and the things he says don't sit right with me." Max's instincts kicked in immediately. Varian had always been one of the sisters' closest allies, and for Lyra to suggest he was involved in something questionable was a huge shift. He had to act quickly. "I'll keep an eye on him," Max said, his voice firm. "We need to know for sure before we make any moves. If he's the one betraying you, I'll handle it." Lyra looked at him, her expression softening for a moment. "Thank you, Max. I don't know who to trust anymore, but I trust you." Max's resolve strengthened. He wasn't just their bodyguard anymore. He was their protector, their ally, and he would do whatever it took to keep Lyra and Serena safe from the growing danger that lurked within their own empire. As he left the study, Max felt the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. The web of betrayal was tightening, and he knew the coming days would bring even greater challenges. But he was ready. He had a job to do, and he wouldn't let the Caliph sisters down. Maxim Steele's investigation into the growing conspiracy surrounding Lyra and Serena Caliph was becoming more tangled by the day. The deeper he dug into the lives of the sisters' trusted advisors, the more secrets began to surface. Every conversation felt like a clue, and every action seemed carefully calculated. Max was learning that the stakes were far higher than he had ever imagined. The Caliph Empire wasn't just on the verge of collapse. It was being actively undermined from within. Max had spent the last few days observing Varian, the trusted personal advisor Lyra had mentioned. At first, Varian had seemed like a straightforward man, efficient, and always present at the sisters' meetings. But now, Max couldn't ignore the signs. There were meetings Varian had kept hidden, hushed whispers exchanged with mysterious figures in dark corners of the mansion, and strange messages sent in secret. One afternoon, while Max was on his routine patrol of the mansion's perimeter, he overheard a conversation between Varian and one of his unknown contacts. The conversation was quiet, but Max's sharp ears caught enough to piece together a disturbing picture. Varian's words were clipped, measured, as though he were planning something, and from what Max could make out, it was a plan to undermine the Caliph sisters. perhaps even to take over parts of the Empire. The weight of this revelation hit Max hard, but he knew he couldn't act just yet. He needed more proof. That night, Max went to Lyra's private chambers, where he had been meeting with her to discuss the security threats. He could see the unease in her eyes. The walls of the room, usually filled with elegant decorations, now felt like a trap. The air was thick with tension, as if both of them were waiting for something to happen. "Max," Lyra said, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking about what you said. About Varian. I can't afford to ignore these warnings anymore. If he's truly working against us, we need to act quickly." Max nodded, his thoughts focused. "I've seen him with my own eyes. He's meeting with people we don't know. I don't think he's acting alone. But we need something concrete before we confront him. If we move too soon, we might expose ourselves." Lyra looked troubled. "You're right, but we can't let this drag on forever. If Varian is plotting against us, the longer we wait, the worse it'll get." Max paused for a moment, considering their options. "I'll follow him tonight. See where he goes, what he does. If he's involved in something, I'll get the evidence you need." Lyra's eyes narrowed, a look of determination replacing her earlier unease. "Be careful, Max. I trust you, but we're playing with fire now. If you get caught, everything could unravel." Max nodded again, his mind focused on the task ahead. He had become more than just a bodyguard to these sisters. He had become their protector, their ally in this game of power. And as much as he hated the idea of sneaking around in the shadows, he knew this was the only way to uncover the truth. That night, under the cover of darkness, Max shadowed Varian, moving through the mansion as silently as a shadow. The game was on, and Max was determined to uncover the full extent of the betrayal, no matter what it took. The path ahead was dangerous, but Max knew he was ready. He would uncover the truth and keep the Caliph sisters safe, even if it meant risking everything. Maxim Steele had followed Varian for hours, moving through the shadows, his every step calculated. He knew the mansion's halls like the back of his hand, but tonight felt different. This wasn't just about keeping an eye on the Caliph sisters' safety. This was about uncovering a betrayal that could shake the entire empire. Varian had always been close to Lyra and Serena, one of their most trusted advisors. Yet tonight, everything Max had suspected about him seemed to be coming to a head. The night was quiet, with only the soft hum of the mansion's security systems keeping the silence at bay. Max watched as Varian slipped into a secluded part of the mansion that Max hadn't noticed before. It was a private area, hidden behind thick doors, one that wasn't part of the usual route Varian would take. Max's heart raced as he approached, knowing this could be the break he needed. As he crouched by the corner of the hallway, he saw Varian slip inside a room, closing the door behind him. Max quickly moved to the side, staying out of sight, but close enough to hear any murmurs from within. He waited, his breath steady, focusing on the sounds coming from behind the thick door. There was a faint noise, the low murmur of voices. Max's sharp ears caught a name, a familiar name. Lord Philos, a known enemy of the Caliph family, a man with a reputation for ruthless tactics and dangerous political ambitions. Max's blood ran cold. If Varian was meeting with someone like Lord Philos, it could mean that everything Max had feared was true. He strained to hear more, his mind racing with possibilities. Varian's voice, though low, was clear. "The time is coming," he said, his tone low and filled with a kind of eerie confidence. "Once I have the sisters under my control, the empire will be mine. We'll deal with Lyra and Serena swiftly. They'll never know what hit them." Max's heart hammered in his chest. The plan was more elaborate than he had imagined. Varian wasn't just working with outsiders. He was planning to take over the Caliph Empire from within. The betrayal ran deeper than Max had thought. He needed to act quickly, but without exposing himself. As Varian spoke more about his plans, Max knew the time had come to gather evidence. He could no longer sit back and observe. He needed to confront Varian with the truth. Max moved silently down the hallway to find a way inside. His mind was clear now. This wasn't just about being a bodyguard anymore. He was fighting for the very future of the Caliph Empire. He would have to be careful. One wrong move could expose him, and if Varian realized Max had discovered his treachery, there was no telling what would happen next. Max finally found a service door slightly ajar and used his stealth to slip inside. He positioned himself just behind the door to listen more closely. The conversation inside continued, with Lord Thelos and Varian discussing the finer details of their coup. It was clear now. Varian had been playing both sides, and the Caliph sisters had no idea just how deep the conspiracy went. Max's pulse quickened as he moved, ready to capture the evidence he needed to stop the plot in its tracks. The stakes had never been higher, and he was about to dive headfirst into the heart of the storm. Maxim Steele stood in the shadows, his pulse racing as the weight of the conversation he had just overheard sank in. The room before him was filled with secrets and plans that threatened to destroy everything Lyra and Serena Caliph had worked for. Varian's betrayal, intertwined with Lord Thelos's ambitions, was more dangerous than Max had ever imagined. The carefully woven web of deceit was now exposed, and Max had to move quickly to stop it before it was too late. He knew that confronting Varian now was too risky. He needed to gather more concrete evidence. Every step had to be precise. One wrong move, and Varian would be tipped off, and the entire conspiracy would come crashing down on them. Max retreated silently from the hidden hallway, his mind racing with a plan. He had to get the information to Lyra and Serena as soon as possible, but it wasn't just about saving them anymore. It was about preventing an empire from falling into the hands of someone who cared nothing for the Caliph legacy. The empire, its people, and the future of the galaxy were at stake. As Max made his way back to the sisters' private quarters, the weight of his responsibility grew heavier. He couldn't just be a bodyguard now. He had become the protector of a dynasty, and with that came the crushing weight of the choices he would have to make. The further he delved into the conspiracy, the more he realized how deeply ingrained the betrayal was. Varian was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Lord Thelos wasn't acting alone. There were other factions involved, waiting for the right moment to strike. When Max reached the sisters' private chambers, he found them both in the sitting area, discussing their strategy for the upcoming negotiations with the other factions. They looked up as he entered, and Max could see the weariness in their eyes. He knew that the constant threats, the political maneuvering, and the stress of their responsibilities were starting to take their toll on them. They were powerful, but they were also vulnerable. Serena was the first to speak. "Max, what did you find out? Have you discovered anything new?" Max swallowed his rising anxiety, knowing this moment would change everything. "I've been following Varian," he said, his voice steady but low. "He's been meeting with Lord Thelos, and I overheard a conversation. They're planning to take over the Empire. They intend to remove both of you from power, quickly and decisively." The room went still, the gravity of his words sinking in. Lyra's face hardened, her usual calm now replaced with a sharp intensity. "We knew there were enemies within, but this is more than we expected," she said, her voice cold with resolve. Max stepped forward, his hand gripping the folder that held the evidence he had gathered. "I've got proof, and we need to move fast. If we don't act now, it might be too late. Varian and Thelos are already making their move." The sisters exchanged a glance, and for a moment, Max saw the vulnerability in their eyes, a brief flash of doubt and uncertainty. But that moment passed, replaced by a steely determination. They were not just going to sit back and let this happen. "We'll deal with this," Serena said, standing up. "Max, we trust you. You've been more than just a bodyguard to us. Now, let's finish this." Max felt a surge of gratitude toward them, but he knew the hardest part was yet to come. The battle wasn't just going to be fought in dark alleys or hidden rooms. It would be fought in the halls of power, with every decision hanging by a thread. The fight for the Empire's future had just begun, and Max would be there every step of the way, no matter what.